Welcome to World of Sleepcraft. Tonight we explore the complete history of Stormwind, the proud capital of humanity and the shining heart of the Alliance. From its ancient founding by the descendants of the Arathi to its rise as the most powerful human kingdom in Azeroth, this city has witnessed the greatest triumphs and darkest hours of its people. Settle in, get comfortable, and let this tale unfold before you. Let yourself settle into a place of comfort now, finding that peaceful position where your body can truly rest. Take a slow, deep breath, feeling the tension of the day begin to fade. Tonight, we journey to a city of white stone and shimmering canals, where the lion banner flies proudly over ancient walls. This is the story of Stormwind, a tale of resilience, sacrifice, and the enduring light of hope. Long before the first stones of Stormwind were laid, humanity existed as scattered tribes across the northern reaches of the eastern kingdoms. These early humans struggled against countless threats, from the fearsome trolls of the Amani Empire to the harsh wilderness that surrounded their meager settlements. They were divided, vulnerable, and without a unified purpose that might lift them from mere survival to true civilization. Life in those ancient days was harsh and brief. The tribes fought among themselves for territory and resources, their small wars weakening them further against the greater threats that surrounded them. The Amani Empire, ruled by trolls who had built a civilization millennia before humans first walked the land, viewed these scattered tribes as little more than vermin to be crushed. Human villages burned, human families were taken as slaves or worse, and still the tribes could not set aside their differences long enough to mount a unified defense. The shamans and wise women of the tribes spoke of a time when humanity would rise above this endless cycle of defeat and despair. They prophesied that a great leader would emerge, one with the vision to unite the scattered peoples and forge them into a nation that could stand against any foe. For generations, these prophecies remained nothing but dreams whispered around dying fires. Then arose a leader who would change everything. His name was Thoradin, a warlord of the Arathi tribe, and he possessed a vision that extended far beyond the borders of his own people. Thoradin understood that humanity's only hope lay in unity. The Amani trolls grew ever more aggressive, their empire ancient and powerful, and no single tribe could hope to stand against them. Over the course of 6 long years, Thoradin embarked on an ambitious campaign to unite all human tribes under a single banner. Some he brought to his cause through political marriages, binding families together across tribal lines. Others he persuaded with promises of wealth, land, and protection. And those who refused to see reason, those who clung too stubbornly to their independence, he conquered through force of arms. By the end of his campaign, Thoradin had achieved what many thought impossible. He named his new unified kingdom Arathor and founded a capital city called Strom in the region that would come to be known as the Arathi Highlands. This marked the birth of the first human civilization, a unified empire that would stand for over a millennium. The empire of Arathor flourished under Thoradin's wise leadership. Humanity finally had the strength to push back against the Amani trolls, and when the high elves of Quel'Thalas sought allies against those same trolls, they found willing partners in the humans of Arathor. An ancient pact was forged between Thoradin and the Elven King, one that promised mutual aid in times of desperate need. This oath would echo through the ages, binding the fates of humans and elves for millennia to come. Yet even the greatest empires must change with the passing of centuries. As generations came and went, Arathor began to evolve. New city-states arose across the continent, each developing its own customs, traditions, and sense of identity. Gilneas, As-Alterac, and Kultiras were among the first to emerge, and though they still acknowledged Strom as the center of human civilization, they grew increasingly independent in their thinking. The empire of Arathor, which had seemed so permanent under Thoradin's banner, was slowly fragmenting. The unity that one man had fought so hard to achieve was giving way to the natural tendency of peoples to form their own identities. It was not war or conquest that undid Thoradin's vision, but simply the passage of time and the growth of humanity itself. Approximately 1,200 years before the opening of the Dark Portal, the great empire finally splintered into 7 distinct kingdoms. These became known as the 7 Kingdoms of Humanity. Lordaeron in the north, the largest and most powerful. Dalaran, the Mage Kingdom and center of arcane learning. Gilneas, a maritime power that would later hide behind its great wall. Stromgard, the martial remnant of ancient Strom. Alterac, a mountain kingdom whose treachery would later doom it. Kultiras, the seafaring island nation, and Stormwind, the kingdom of Azeroth in the south. It was around this time that the last descendants of Thoradin's Arathi bloodline made a momentous decision. Led by a nobleman named Falder, they chose to abandon Arathor entirely and seek a new beginning in distant lands. They gathered their people, boarded ships, and sailed south into waters that few had ever charted. The journey was long and perilous. They traveled past the rocky mountains of Khaz-Modan, catching glimpses of the dwarven settlements hidden among the peaks. They endured storms and hardships, their determination tested with each passing day. Many seasons came and went before they finally reached their destination. What they found was a fertile valley in the northern region of a continent they would name Azeroth. The land was lush with forests of stately hardwoods, watered by clear streams, and blessed with rich soil that promised abundant harvests. Here, the descendants of the Arathi decided to put down roots. They called their new kingdom Stormwind, and it would quickly become a self-sufficient power in its own right. The early settlers faced many challenges in their new home. Hostile gnolls roamed the mountains of Redridge, their packs growing bolder as human settlements expanded. To the south, the fearsome Gurubashi trolls watched the newcomers with hostile eyes, remembering their own ancient conflicts with the Amani and viewing all outsiders as potential threats. The first winter in the new land tested the colonists severely. They had arrived with limited supplies, and the local vegetation was unfamiliar. Hunting parties ventured into the forests, learning which animals could be eaten and which were too dangerous to approach. Fishermen discovered the bounty of the rivers and coastal waters. Farmers experimented with the soil, discovering which crops from their homeland would grow in this new climate. Disease swept through the early settlements, claiming the young and old alike. The healers worked day and night, using what knowledge they had brought from the north, combined with new remedies, discovered through desperate experimentation. Many died that first year, their graves marked by simple stones that would later be replaced with proper monuments. Yet despite the hardships, more settlers arrived. Ships from the north brought new colonists, drawn by tales of fertile land and new opportunities. The population grew, and with it came the need for organization. Village councils formed to settle disputes. Militia companies organized to defend against Gnoll raids. Trade networks developed, connecting the scattered settlements into a functioning economy. The Arathi traditions that the colonists had brought from the north adapted to their new circumstances. The language evolved, developing new words for plants and animals that had no names in the old tongue. Religious practices incorporated local customs. Marriage ceremonies, funeral rites, and seasonal festivals all changed over the generations, creating a culture that was distinctly Stormwindian rather than merely a transplanted copy of what had come before. Yet the people of Stormwind persevered. They built farmsteads across the fertile region of Elwyn Forest, establishing small towns that would grow into thriving communities. Goldshire became the largest settlement outside the capital, its population eventually swelling to over 7,000 souls. Westfall emerged as the breadbasket of the kingdom, its golden fields providing abundant crops. Redridge served as a bulwark against threats from the mountains, while Brightwood offered beautiful woodlands that seemed to glow with peaceful light. Though Stormwind was initially the smallest and most isolated of the 7 human kingdoms, its people built something remarkable in their new home. Cut off from the northern kingdoms by vast distances, they learned to rely on themselves. This isolation bred a fierce independence and determination that would serve them well in the trials to come. The history of Stormwind cannot be told without understanding the House of Rin, the royal dynasty that would guide the kingdom through its greatest triumphs and darkest hours. The Rins rose to power through a combination of martial prowess, political acumen, and genuine care for their people. Unlike the courts of some northern kingdoms, which were plagued by constant bickering and infighting, the Rin rulers maintained a tradition of stability and justice. The first known member of the Rin dynasty was King Llane Rin. While the records do not tell us whether Llane was the founder of his house or simply one among many Rin kings before him, we know that he established the patterns of rule that his descendants would follow. He was the father of Barathen, and through him, the grandfather of the legendary King Llane. Every Rin who would sit upon the throne of Stormwind traced their lineage back to Llane. As the years passed under Landen's rule, a new threat began to gather in the mountains. The Gnolls, who had long been a nuisance to Stormwind's outlying settlements, were unifying under a powerful leader. His name was Packlord Garfang, and like Thoradin before him, he understood the power of unity. Through crude diplomacy or brutal force, Garfang brought numerous Gnoll packs under his command, forging them into an army that posed a genuine threat to the kingdom. When Llane passed, and his son Barathen Rin took the throne, the Gnoll threat had grown too dangerous to ignore. King Barathen beseeched the other human kingdoms for aid, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. The northern kingdoms considered Stormwind too distant, too unimportant, too different from their own concerns. They would not send soldiers to fight Gnolls in mountains they had never seen. Barathen Rin was not a man to accept defeat. If no help would come, he would handle the threat himself. He devised a bold and dangerous plan, one that would either save his kingdom or cost him his life. Taking only a small party of his finest armored knights, Barathen waited for the next Gnoll assault to begin. When the Gnolls attacked, instead of meeting them at the walls, the king and his knights rode away from Stormwind, driving east into the Red Ridge Mountains. The king had decided to cut off the head of the snake. If he could reach Garfang's camp and slay the Pack Lord, the Gnoll army would dissolve into squabbling packs once more. It was a desperate gamble, but Barathen understood that his kingdom could not endure a prolonged war against a unified Gnoll horde. When the royal party reached Garfang's camp, they found themselves facing the Pack Lord and his personal guards. What followed was a battle that lasted a full day and night. Knights fell, their armor rent by Gnoll claws and crude weapons. But the survivors pressed on, fighting with the fury of men who knew that everything depended on their success. Finally, as dawn broke over the blood-soaked battlefield, King Barathen himself sank his blade into Packlord Garfang's neck. The Gnoll leader fell, and with him fell the unity he had imposed upon his kind. Half of Barathen's knights had perished in the assault, but the bold plan had worked. Without Garfang to hold them together, the remaining Gnolls quickly fell to infighting, their threat to Stormwind dissolving almost overnight. From that day forward, Barathen Rin was known as the Adamant, in honor of his bravery and unyielding determination. He ruled Stormwind for nearly 58 years, and remarkably long reign for a human king. Under his steady hand, the kingdom prospered and grew strong, but even the Adamant could not rule forever. Late in his reign, another threat arose from the south. The Gurubashi trolls, those ancient enemies who had watched Stormwind's growth with jealous eyes, rallied under a new leader named Zannon. They gathered their warriors and marched to war, launching an attack on Stormwind City itself. King Barathen fought bravely in defense of his city, but he was an old man now, his legendary strength diminished by the weight of years. He fell during the battle, joining his ancestors in death. Yet his sacrifice was not in vain, for his son Prince Llane was there to take up the fight. Llane was not alone in his defense of the city. At his side stood two companions who had been his closest friends since childhood. One was Anduin Lothar, a warrior of extraordinary skill who carried the blood of the ancient Arathi in his veins. The other was Medivh, the son of the court sorcerer, who possessed magical powers beyond those of any other human alive. Together, the three friends held the line against the Gurubashi assault. Llane convinced Medivh to unleash his full powers against the trolls, and the young mage's devastating magic turned the tide of battle. The Gurubashi were routed, their invasion shattered, and Stormwind was saved. In the aftermath of victory, Llane Rin was welcomed as Stormwind's new ruler. He was crowned King Llane Rin I, and under his wise and just leadership, the kingdom of Azeroth reached its absolute height. The chronicles describe it as the mightiest of all human nations before the Age of Chaos began. Llane was a king who understood that true strength came from the prosperity and happiness of his people. He invested heavily in infrastructure, improving roads that connected the outlying villages to the capital. He established schools where children of common birth could learn to read and write, believing that an educated populace was the foundation of a great kingdom. He reformed the courts to ensure that justice was available to all, not just those with wealth and connections. The king's relationship with his people was one of genuine affection. He walked among them during festivals, shared meals with soldiers and farmers alike, and listened to their concerns without the barrier of formal audiences. Merchants and craftsmen knew they could approach their king directly if they had grievances. This accessibility made Llane beloved in a way that few rulers ever achieve. Under Llane's guidance, Stormwind's arts and culture flourished. Poets composed epic verses celebrating the kingdom's history and heroes. Sculptors created works that adorned public spaces throughout the capital. Musicians developed new forms that would influence human culture for generations. The royal court became a center of learning and refinement, attracting scholars and artists from across the continent. The economy thrived as never before. Stormwind's position in the southern region of the eastern kingdoms made it a natural hub for trade. Goods flowed through its ports from distant lands. The guilds of craftsmen produced wares renowned for their quality. The treasury filled with gold, which Llane wisely reinvested in public works rather than hoarding in vaults. Foreign relations were handled with diplomatic skill. Though isolated from the northern kingdoms by distance and geography, Stormwind maintained cordial ties with its neighbors. Ambassadors traveled between courts, establishing relationships that would later prove crucial when threats arose. The kingdom's reputation grew as a prosperous and peaceful realm, a beacon of what humanity could achieve when led by a just ruler. These were golden years for Stormwind. The well-trained armies maintained lasting peace across the kingdom's territories. The Knights of Stormwind, formerly known as the Brotherhood of the Horse, roamed far and wide in service to the crown. Founded generations earlier, after an early king was assassinated, the Brotherhood provided an order of knights loyal to the House of Rin above all else. Many consider them the progenitors of the Stormwind army, as they stood as the kingdom's first soldiers, directly loyal to the crown rather than to individual noble houses. The most notable among these knights was Anduin Lothar himself, who had risen to the position of armsman. His skill with a blade was legendary, and his dedication to the realm was beyond question. These mounted warriors proved decisive in many battles, their charges breaking enemy formations and inspiring hope in common soldiers. At the same time, devout clerics of the Church of the Holy Light had ventured south from Lordaeron and established Northshire Abbey in the peaceful forests near the capital. These priests founded the Holy Order of Northshire Clerics, bringing the teachings of the light to Stormwind's people. The kingdom looked to these clerics as a source of wisdom and comfort in hard times, their healing powers and gentle guidance helping to soothe both body and spirit. The Church of the Holy Light had originated in the northern kingdoms, its philosophy built upon three virtues: respect, tenacity, and compassion. The light was not a deity to be worshipped, but a cosmic force that flowed through all living things. Those who walked in the light learned to channel this force through prayer and meditation, achieving remarkable feats of healing and protection. The clerics who came to Northshire brought with them centuries of accumulated wisdom. They established a library within the abbey, filling it with texts on theology, philosophy, medicine, and history. Young men and women who felt called to serve the light traveled from across the kingdom to study at Northshire, learning the ways of the clergy before returning to their home villages as priests and healers. The abbey itself was built in a style that reflected the harmony the clerics sought to cultivate. Simple stone buildings surrounded a central courtyard where gardens grew herbs used in healing. The chapel was modest but beautiful, its windows designed to catch the morning light and fill the interior with a warm golden glow. Bells rang at dawn and dusk, their tones carrying across the peaceful forest. Beyond healing the sick and injured, the clerics served as educators and counselors. They taught children to read and write, preserved historical records, and mediated disputes between neighbors. When famine or disease struck outlying villages, the priests of Northshire organized relief efforts, distributing food and providing care to those in need. The relationship between Northshire Abbey and the Crown was one of mutual respect. King Llane himself visited the abbey on several occasions, seeking spiritual counsel and offering the crown's protection to the religious community. The clerics, in turn, blessed the king's soldiers before battle and prayed for the kingdom's prosperity. This partnership between sword and spirit would prove essential in the dark days to come. When war finally reached Stormwind's borders, the clerics of Northshire would serve alongside the knights and soldiers, healing the wounded, comforting the dying, and maintaining the morale of a people facing extinction. The people of Stormwind lived in peace and prosperity. Farmers worked their fields without fear of raids. Merchants traveled the roads safely under the protection of the Brotherhood. Children grew up knowing only the blessings of a kingdom at harmony with itself and its neighbors. None could have imagined how quickly this golden age would come to its terrible end. The peace of Stormwind was shattered by events that none could have foreseen or prevented. The darkness came not from any enemy the kingdom had ever faced, but from one of its own most trusted sons. Medivh, the childhood friend of King Llane, had grown into the most powerful mage on Azeroth. He had been chosen by fate as the guardian of Tirisfal, humanity's intended protector against the forces of darkness. But unknown to anyone, Medivh's incredible power came with a terrible curse. The dark spirit of Sargeras, a lord of the Burning Legion, had possessed Medivh before his birth. For years, this corruption remained dormant, but as Medivh reached the height of his power, Sargeras began to twist his thoughts toward an insidious end. Medivh made his home in the Tower of Karajan, a massive spire that rose from the blighted lands of Deadwind Pass. There, in chambers filled with arcane secrets, the possessed guardian planned an act of treachery that would reshape the world. He reached across the void between dimensions, making contact with Gul'dan, a warlock on the dying world of Draenor. On Draenor, the orcish horde had been corrupted by demonic blood and driven to bloodlust by the Burning Legion. They had conquered their world, slaughtering the peaceful Draenei who had once been their neighbors. But Draenor was dying, its life force drained by the warlock's dark magics, and the orcs faced extinction unless they found new lands to conquer. Medivh offered Gul'dan a bargain. The Guardian would provide a gateway to a new world, rich with life and ripe for conquest. In exchange, Gul'dan would bring the Horde to Azeroth, where they would unwittingly serve Sargeras' purposes. Through a joint effort, Medivh and the warlocks of Gul'dan's Shadow Council opened a dimensional gate that came to be known as the Dark Portal. The portal materialized in the Black Morass, a vast swamp in southern Stormwind territory. Through it poured the Orcish horde, their green skin and savage appearance unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. The orcs emerged into this new world with bloodlust burning in their eyes, ready to conquer all that lay before them. The opening of the Dark Portal marks year zero in the chronology of Azeroth. Everything that came before is measured as years before the Dark Portal, and everything after as years after the Dark Portal. It was a moment that changed history forever. King Llane dispatched Anduin Lothar to discover what these new creatures were and what threat they posed. Lothar led a small force of the Brotherhood to scout the Black Morass, and it was there that humans clashed with orcs for the first time. The Knights of Stormwind were skilled warriors, and they scored several small victories against orcish patrols. The first encounters between humans and orcs were confusing and terrifying for both sides. The orcs had never seen beings like humans before, smaller than most orc warriors, lacking the green skin and tusks that marked the children of Draenor, yet fighting with a discipline and determination that caught many orc raiders off guard. The humans, for their part, faced creatures out of nightmare, with monstrous strength and a savage bloodlust that seemed to know no bounds. Sir Anduin Lothar himself wrote of those early battles in letters to King Llane. He described the orcs as warriors of fearsome aspect, green of skin and red of eye, who fight with neither fear nor mercy. He noted their crude but effective weapons, their pack tactics, and their willingness to die rather than retreat. "We have faced many enemies," Lothar wrote, "but never anything like this. They are not beasts, for they use weapons and tactics. They are not men, for they know nothing of honor or surrender. They are something new, something terrible." But each engagement revealed the terrible truth. There were so many orcs. No matter how many fell to Stormwind steel, more emerged from the Dark Portal. The Horde under Warchief Blackhand pushed deeper into Stormwind's territories, their advance seemingly unstoppable. Entire villages in Brightwood, Westfall, and the southern Redridge Mountains were destroyed. Inhabitants were killed or forced to flee, their homes put to the torch. The cities of Grand Hamlet, Moonbrook, and Goldshire all suffered attacks on the Horde's path of destruction toward the capital. By the time Stormwind's patrols arrived to defend a village, the Horde was already gone, leaving only ashes and corpses behind. Stormwind had been completely unprepared for such an invasion. King Llane reached out to the other human kingdoms, warning them of the orcish threat, but his pleas were dismissed. The northern kings could not believe that a truly dangerous enemy had emerged so far to the south. They considered it Stormwind's problem alone. The discovery of Medev's betrayal came through unlikely sources. Khadgar, a young mage who had been studying as Medev's apprentice, noticed disturbing changes in his master. With the help of Garona, a half-orc emissary who had come to Stormwind under a flag of truce, Khadgar gathered evidence that Medivh was responsible for opening the Dark Portal. When this evidence was brought before King Llane, the king could hardly believe it. Medivh had been his friend since childhood, one of the 3 companions who had saved Stormwind from the Gurubashi. How could such a trusted ally be a traitor? But the evidence was undeniable. Lothar chose to follow his instincts and his duty. He gathered a band of troops, along with Khadgar and Garona, and stormed Karajan itself. The assault on the tower was desperate and costly, but finally the attackers reached the chamber where Medivh waited. The battle against the possessed guardian was unlike any they had faced. Medivh's power was tremendous, fueled by both his own abilities and the dark essence of Sargeras. But in the end, Khadgar managed to drive a blade into Medivh's heart, and Lothar's greatsword removed his head with a single stroke. The Guardian fell, and with his death, the spirit of Sargeras was banished back to the abyss. Yet killing Medivh could not undo the damage he had wrought. The dark portal remained open, and the horde continued to pour through. The death of the Guardian unleashed a wave of fell energy that corrupted the lands around Karajan. The so beautiful Brightwood was transformed into the dark and dangerous realm now known as Duskwood, its forests forever shrouded in unnatural shadow, and the war continued. Under a new war chief named Orgrim Doomhammer, who had killed Blackhand in single combat and taken command, the horde regrouped and launched a second siege of Stormwind City. This time, the Orcish assault would not be stopped. During the siege, tragedy struck at the very heart of the kingdom. Garona, the half-orc who had helped expose Medivh's treachery and had become a trusted friend to King Llane, was herself a tool of the enemy. Gul'dan had given her 2 magical daggers called Anguish and Sorrow, imbued with demonic power by the demon lord Kil'jaeden himself. Whenever Garona wielded these blades, Kil'jaeden's influence over her grew, turning her into an unwilling assassin. Though Garona had come to genuinely care for Llane and his people, she could not resist the dark compulsion. Under Gul'dan's control, she assassinated King Llane Wrynn, cutting out his heart with the very daggers that bore such sorrowful names. Young Prince Varian could only watch helplessly as his father was murdered. The chronicles tell us that Garona wept as she performed the terrible deed, tears streaming down her face, even as her hands carried out the assassination she was forced to commit. It was a tragedy for both the killer and the killed. The assassination crushed human morale. With their king dead and the Orcish forces overwhelming the city's defenses, Stormwind's fall became inevitable. The second siege ended with the complete destruction of the capital. The magnificent city of white stone and flowing canals was razed to the ground. The kingdom that had stood for over 1,000 years had fallen. Lord Anduin Lothar knew that the war was lost. He had failed to save his king and his kingdom, but he would not fail to save his people. Gathering the tattered remnants of the army and as many civilians as he could find, Lothar led a desperate retreat northward. Thousands of boats filled with refugees sailed across the Great Sea, carrying the survivors of Stormwind toward the shores of Lordaeron. The evacuation was conducted under the most desperate circumstances imaginable. The horde pressed from all sides, their victory howls echoing through the burning streets. Lothar organized holding actions, sacrificing warriors to buy time for civilians to reach the ships. Priests provided healing and comfort to the wounded, while soldiers fought rearguard actions in every alley and plaza. The ships themselves were anything that could float: fishing vessels, trading ships, pleasure barges, anything with a hull and a sail. Families crowded onto decks with whatever they could carry in their arms. Merchants abandoned warehouses full of goods. Nobles left behind mansions filled with treasures accumulated over generations. What mattered was survival, nothing else. As the last ships pulled away from the docks, those aboard could see the flames consuming their city. Towers that had stood for centuries collapsed into rubble. The great keep where the Wrynn dynasty had ruled for generations burned with an intensity that could be seen for miles. The sound of orcish drums echoed across the water, a triumphant cadence celebrating the destruction of everything the refugees had known. Many could not bear to watch. They turned their backs on their burning home, their eyes fixed on the northern horizon where an uncertain future awaited. Others could not look away, burning the image into their memories so that they would never forget what had been taken from them, so that they would never rest until it was reclaimed. They left behind a land of ashes and death. Everything they had built, everything they had known, everything their ancestors had created over 12 centuries lay in ruins. The people of Stormwind had lost their home, but they had not lost their hope. Anduin Lothar would see to that. The refugees from Stormwind arrived in Lordaeron as a broken people. They had lost their kingdom, their king, and their homes. Many had watched family members die in the Horde's assault. They were strangers in a foreign land, dependent on the charity of those who had refused to help them when help might have saved everything. The journey across the Great Sea had been harrowing. Ships overcrowded with refugees sailed through storm and darkness, their passengers clinging to whatever hope remained. Some vessels were lost to storms, their cries swallowed by the indifferent waves. Others arrived with holds filled with the sick and dying, their passengers weakened by the long flight from the Horde's pursuit. Those who reached Lordaeron found a kingdom unprepared for such an influx of desperate refugees. The ports were overwhelmed. Food and shelter were scarce. The people of Lordaeron, who had never experienced the horrors of Orcish warfare, looked upon the Stormwind survivors with a mixture of pity and unease. These were not dignified guests, but ragged survivors, their clothing torn, their faces marked by trauma, their children crying for homes that no longer existed. Young Prince Varian, heir to a kingdom of ashes, walked among these refugees. Though he was royalty, he had suffered alongside his people. He had lost his father, and he had lost his home. He had lost everything except his name and his determination. The experience would shape the man he would become, instilling in him a profound connection to the common people that would define his reign. But King Tyrannus II of Lordaeron proved wiser than those who had dismissed Stormwind's warnings. He had heard Lothar's accounts of the Orcish invasion, and he understood that what had happened to Stormwind could happen to any kingdom. The orcs would not stop at one conquest. Having tasted victory, they would hunger for more. At Lothar's urging, King Tyrannus gathered the leaders of all the human kingdoms together at the Council of 7 Nations. The gathering was contentious from the start. King Gen Greymane of Gilneas and King Aidan Paranolda of Alterac threatened to abandon the council, more concerned about losing their regional power than about the threat that had destroyed an entire kingdom. The debates might have failed entirely, if not for an extraordinary intervention. The venerable priest Turalion, who would become one of the greatest paladins in history, brought young Prince Varian to stand before the assembled leaders. Here was a boy who had watched his father murdered, who had fled his burning home, who represented everything that awaited any nation that stood alone against the Horde. Turalion delivered an impassioned speech, using Stormwind as an example of what would happen to any kingdom that failed to unite. His words were powerful, but it was the presence of the orphaned prince, standing with the quiet dignity that would later mark his rule, that truly moved the hearts of those present. The Alliance of Lordaeron was formed. The human kingdoms of Lordaeron, Gilneas, Stromgard, Dalaran, and Kultiras pledged to stand together against the Horde. The High Elves of Quel'Thalas joined as well, honoring the ancient pact that Thoradin had made with their ancestors. The dwarves of Ironforge and the gnomes of Nomerigan added their strength to the alliance. Anduin Lothar was named Supreme Allied Commander, entrusted with leading all alliance forces against the Horde. It was a position that recognized both his military genius and his moral authority as the last of the Arathi bloodline. The Second War was long and brutal. The Horde pushed deep into Alliance territory, threatening to overwhelm the combined forces just as they had overwhelmed Stormwind alone. The Orcs had not been idle since their conquest of Stormwind. They had established massive shipyards along the coast, constructing a navy that could challenge the combined fleets of the human kingdoms. They had recruited ogres from the mountains, adding these massive brutes to their already formidable army. They had enslaved the red dragonflight through dark magic, gaining aerial forces that seemed unstoppable. The battles of the Second War raged across the eastern kingdoms. The orcs struck at Cosmodan, threatening the dwarven homeland. They pushed into the Hillsbrad foothills, bringing war to Lordaeron's southern territories. They even launched naval assaults against Kultiras and the coastal cities, their crude but effective ships proving surprisingly capable against the human fleets. Lordaeron itself came under siege. The capital that had seemed so secure, the great city of the north, found Orcish armies at its gates. King Tyrannus and his people experienced firsthand the terror that Stormwind had faced alone. The difference was that this time the defenders had allies. Dwarven riflemen manned the walls alongside human archers. Elven rangers provided reconnaissance and magical support. Gnomish inventors contributed ingenious devices and weapons. The war lasted for over 2 years. Countless lives were lost on both sides. Villages burned, fields were salted, and refugees crowded the roads between the kingdoms. The continent seemed poised on the brink of annihilation, with the Horde advancing steadily despite every sacrifice the Alliance made to stop them. But the Horde had internal divisions that the Alliance did not. Warchief Orgrim Doomhammer's decision to cut ties with the Warlocks and their demonic masters cost him the support of Gul'dan. At a critical moment in the war, when the Horde was poised for a final push against Lordaeron, Gul'dan took his followers and sailed to the Broken Isles, seeking the tomb of Sargeras and the power it contained. This betrayal cost the Horde momentum at the worst possible time. Doomhammer was forced to split his forces, sending warriors to deal with Gul'dan's treachery while trying to maintain his siege of Lordaeron. The division proved fatal to the Orcish campaign, but this time the forces of order held. Battle by battle, the Alliance pushed back, their unity proving stronger than the Horde's fury. The war's climax came at the siege of Blackrock Spire, the Horde's stronghold in the volcanic mountains between the burning steppes and the searing gorge. Lothar led the final assault himself, determined to end the war that had taken his kingdom and his king. During the battle, Anduin Lothar fell. The last of the ancient Arathi bloodline, the Lion of Azeroth, died leading the charge against the enemy. His death might have broken the Alliance, but Turalyon was there to take up his fallen commander's banner. Turalyon's rallying cry galvanized the Alliance forces. They fought with renewed fury, driven by grief for their lost leader and determination to honor his sacrifice. The Horde was defeated, its forces shattered, its surviving members herded into internment camps. The aftermath of the Second War left the Alliance victorious, but exhausted. The internment camps established to hold the defeated orcs became a controversial necessity. Some argued for execution of the prisoners, viewing them as monsters beyond redemption. Others, influenced by the teachings of the light, advocated for a more merciful approach. In the end, the camps remained, their orcish prisoners stripped of their weapons and confined behind walls, their future uncertain. For the people of Stormwind, the news of victory brought complex emotions. They had won, but their kingdom lay in ruins. They had avenged King Llane and Anduin Lothar, but those heroes could not be brought back. The refugees who had fled north as homeless wanderers would return as a nation determined to rebuild, but the task before them seemed almost impossible. The journey home was both joyful and sorrowful. Ships that had carried refugees north now carried them south again, their holds filled with the possessions they had accumulated during exile. Families who had been separated during the chaos of the First War were reunited. Children who had been born in Lordaeron would now see their ancestral homeland for the first time, and throughout the fleet, people gazed southward, wondering what they would find when they reached their destination. What they found was devastation beyond imagining. The orcs had not simply conquered Stormwind, they had demolished it. The beautiful white stone walls had been torn down. The elegant buildings had been burned and smashed. The canals were choked with rubble. Weeds grew through cracks in the streets where once merchants had traded. Nature was already reclaiming what humanity had built. Some wept at the sight. Others fell silent, the reality of reconstruction suddenly feeling impossible. How could they rebuild an entire city from rubble? How could they restore what had taken their ancestors centuries to create? The task seemed to mock their ambitions. But they were the people of Stormwind. They had survived the First War, the death of their king, exile, and the Second War. They would not be defeated by rubble and weeds. They set to work. With the war won, the Alliance turned its attention to rebuilding. Stormwind's reconstruction became a priority for the victorious kingdoms. King Tyrannus personally guaranteed that the southern kingdom would rise again, and that young Prince Varian would one day sit upon its restored throne. For the massive task of rebuilding an entire city, the Alliance needed master craftsmen. They turned to the Stonemasons Guild, led by a brilliant architect and engineer named Edwin Van Cleef. Van Cleef was a genius, and under his direction, the reconstruction of Stormwind proceeded smoothly despite the enormous scale of the project. The scope of the work was staggering. Stormwind had not merely been damaged, it had been razed to its foundations. The orcs had torn down walls, burned buildings, and destroyed infrastructure that had taken centuries to build. Starting from scratch, the stonemasons faced a challenge unlike anything attempted in human history. Van Cleef organized the labor with military precision. Work crews were assigned to different districts, each with specific responsibilities. Quarries were established in the mountains of Redridge to provide stone. Lumber came from the forests of Elwyn. Ships carried materials from Ironforge and Menethil Harbor. The supply chain alone required hundreds of dedicated workers to maintain. The workers themselves came from across the Alliance. Not just humans, but dwarves skilled in stonework, gnomes who contributed engineering solutions, and even a few high elves who advised on architectural aesthetics. The reconstruction of Stormwind became a cooperative effort that transcended racial boundaries, a symbol of what the Alliance could achieve when united in purpose. The Stonemasons rebuilt everything. The white stone walls and towers rose again from the ashes. Stormwind Keep was restored to its former glory. The magnificent Cathedral of Light was constructed, its spires reaching toward the heavens. The canal system was recreated, bringing flowing water throughout the city. District by district, bridge by bridge, the capital was reborn. In less than 10 years, the work was complete. The new Stormwind was, if anything, more beautiful than the city that had fallen. It stood as a testament to human resilience, a symbol of hope for all who had survived the war. During the reconstruction, General Turalyon personally oversaw much of the work, ensuring that Stormwind's defenses were stronger than ever. He helped train the new army, passing on the lessons learned in the desperate battles of the Second War. But even as Stormwind rose from its ashes, a new threat emerged. King Tyrannus of Lordaeron became convinced that the orcs were preparing a new invasion from their homeworld of Draenor. He assembled his most trusted lieutenants and ordered them to lead an expedition through the Dark Portal to end the Orcish threat once and for all. Turalyon raised his banner, declaring he would lead the Sons of Lothar into the Orcish homeworld. The name honored his fallen commander, and it drew nearly every hero of the Second War to the cause. Ilaria Windrunner, the ranger captain of Silvermoon, served as head scout. Danath Trollbane came from Stromgard as force commander. Kurdran Wildhammer represented the dwarves. Khadgar, who had helped slay Medivh, joined as the expedition's archmage. The Sons of Lothar marched through the Dark Portal into Draenor. They established Honorhold as their primary base and achieved numerous victories against the remaining Orcish clans. But their triumph was short-lived. The Orc warlock Ner'zhul had obtained powerful artifacts and was using them to open countless portals across Draenor. The spell was too powerful, too uncontrolled. It began tearing the world apart. Draenor was dying, and if the portals were not stopped, the destruction would spread to Azeroth itself. The Sons of Lothar made the ultimate sacrifice. They destroyed the Dark Portal's stone frame from the Draenor side, severing the link between the two worlds. As Draenor shattered into the Broken Realm, known as Outland, Turalyon and his companions were separated from Azeroth, believed dead by all who remained. In honor of these heroes, 5 statues were erected in what came to be known as the Valley of Heroes, the grand entrance to the rebuilt Stormwind city. These monuments depicted Turalyon, Ilaria, Danath, Kurdran, and Khadgar standing eternal guard over the city they had helped to save. Every visitor who entered Stormwind would pass beneath their stone gazes, reminded of the sacrifices that had preserved their world. With the reconstruction complete and the threat from Draenor sealed away, Prince Varian Rin came of age and was crowned King of Stormwind. The boy who had witnessed his father's murder, who had fled as a refugee, who had grown up in exile, now sat upon the throne of his ancestors. Under his rule, the southern kingdom of Azeroth grew prosperous again, reestablishing itself as a military power. Stormwind had truly risen from the ashes. The coronation ceremony was held in the newly built Cathedral of Light, its spires still fresh and gleaming from construction. Nobles from across the Alliance attended, along with representatives from Ironforge, Gnomrigan, and even distant Cool Tiras. The young king knelt before the altar, and Archbishop Alonsus Fowl placed the crown upon his head. Varian rose as king, the first of his line to rule over a rebuilt Stormwind. The early years of Varian's reign were dedicated to reconstruction and recovery. While the city itself had been restored, the surrounding territories still bore the scars of war. Farms needed to be rebuilt, roads repaired, and villages repopulated. The king personally traveled throughout his kingdom, meeting with local leaders and assessing needs. He was not content to rule from the comfort of his keep. He wanted to see his kingdom with his own eyes. Trade routes were re-established with the northern kingdoms. Stormwind's merchants once again sailed to Lordaeron's ports, carrying goods south and returning with products from the continent's heartland. The economy slowly recovered as confidence returned to the people. Farmers planted crops without fear that orcs would burn their fields. Craftsmen established workshops, confident that their work would find buyers. The military was rebuilt from the ground up. Many veterans of the Second War had remained in the north or perished in the campaigns. Varian worked with his generals to recruit and train a new generation of soldiers. The Brotherhood of the Horse was reconstituted, its knights once again patrolling the kingdom's roads. Young warriors trained in the same techniques that Anduin Lothar had perfected, carrying on the traditions of Stormwind's greatest hero. It was during this time that Varian met Tiffin, a noblewoman whose family had lost much during the wars, but who carried herself with grace and kindness. Their courtship was brief but genuine. Varian, who had known so much loss, found in Tiffin a partner who understood both the burdens of nobility and the simple joys of life. They were married in the Cathedral of Light, and for a time the kingdom celebrated as their young king found happiness. Yet even as Stormwind celebrated its restoration, the seeds of a new crisis were being planted. The very craftsmen who had rebuilt the city would soon become its enemies, and the cause was betrayal from those who owed them the most. When the magnificent reconstruction was complete, the Stonemasons Guild expected to receive the payment they had been promised. These men had labored for years to restore Stormwind to glory. They had given their sweat, their skill, and in some cases, their lives to the work. They had rebuilt every wall, every bridge, every tower. The least they deserved was fair compensation for their efforts. But when the time came for payment, the nobles of Stormwind refused to pay what had been promised. The accounts differ on exactly what happened. The nobles claimed that Edwin Van Cleef demanded far more than the original amount agreed upon. The Stonemasons insisted that the nobles simply refused to pay even what had been promised. The truth was more complex and more damning. The House of Nobles had run up massive debts by expanding the kingdom's military presence throughout Elwyn and into Stranglethorn. This expansion, meant to secure the kingdom's borders, had drained the treasury. When the bill for the reconstruction came due, there simply was not enough gold to pay it. But there was more at work than mere mismanagement. In the shadows, a sinister force was manipulating both sides. Lady Katrana Prester, a high noble who had become one of King Varian's most trusted advisors, was not what she appeared to be. In truth, she was Onyxia, daughter of the dragon Deathwing, disguised in human form. Using a magical artifact called the Drakefire Amulet, She had infiltrated Stormwind's court and was working to sow chaos and discord. Onyxia played both sides against each other. She whispered in the ears of nobles, turning them against the stonemasons and their excessive demands. She stoked the workers' rage, ensuring that no compromise could be reached. Every attempt at negotiation was sabotaged by her subtle manipulations. Some of the senior stonemasons, including Van Cleef himself, were offered government positions if they would accept a reduced payment and keep quiet. It was essentially a bribe, an attempt to buy off the leaders while abandoning the common workers who had actually done the labor. Edwin Van Cleef refused. He would not betray the men who had worked beside him. These were honest craftsmen who had poured their hearts into rebuilding Stormwind, and they deserved every copper they had been promised. Van Cleef stood before the House of Nobles and demanded restitution. The nobles' response was shocking. They ordered the Stonemasons Guild disbanded entirely, casting out the very men who had rebuilt their city. Van Cleef, enraged beyond words, spat on the floor of the halls he had built and walked out, vowing that he would make the city pay one way or another. What followed was the darkest chapter in Stormwind's internal history. At Van Cleef's urging, the workers rioted in the streets of the capital. The stonemason riots were dangerous and chaotic, with angry craftsmen clashing with city guards throughout the districts they had constructed with their own hands. In the confusion of the riots, tragedy struck at the heart of the kingdom. Queen Tiffin Rin, King Varian's beloved wife, and the mother of young Prince Anduin, attempted to calm the rioting workers. She had actually been among those who pleaded for the stonemasons to be paid fairly, recognizing the injustice that had been done to them. A thrown stone struck Queen Tiffin in the head. Perhaps it was an accident, perhaps it was aimed at someone else, or perhaps in the chaos someone lashed out without thinking. Whatever the cause, the queen fell and did not rise. She died from her injuries, leaving King Varian a widower and their infant son motherless. Tiffin's death transformed the situation entirely. What had been a labor dispute became something far more serious. King Varian, devastated by the loss of his wife, vowed to punish those responsible. He ordered a brutal crackdown on the rioters, and several more died in the streets. Van Cleef and the surviving stonemasons fled the city, hiding in the rural areas of Westfall to escape prosecution. They knew that Varian's anger would never fade, that they would be hunted for the rest of their lives. The man who had rebuilt Stormwind had become its most wanted fugitive. In exile, Van Cleef united the scattered stonemasons and transformed them into something new. Using skills in stealth and subterfuge that he had learned over the years, he founded the Defias Brotherhood. The organization that had once been a guild of honest craftsmen became a criminal syndicate composed of thieves, bandits, and vicious mercenaries. The Defias terrorized the lands around Stormwind. Westfall, once the breadbasket of the kingdom, fell into ruin as farmers were driven from their fields. Caravans were raided throughout Elwyn Forest. The chaos spread into Duskwood and beyond. Van Cleef chose the Dead Mines, an abandoned mining network hidden beneath Moonbrook, as his base of operations. There, in the depths of the earth, Van Cleef oversaw an audacious project. Using the same skills that had rebuilt Stormwind, the Defias began constructing a massive naval vessel called a Juggernaut. Once complete, This ship would be sailed out of the hidden underground harbor and used to assault Stormwind from the sea. The very talent that had restored the city would be turned to its destruction. The Defias Brotherhood kept Stormwind's forces constantly occupied, but they were not working alone. Van Cleef had allies within the House of Nobles itself. Lord Gregor Lescavar was a conspirator who aided the Defias in their plots against the king. The corruption that had led to the Stonemasons' betrayal had never been cleansed from the kingdom's government. It would take the efforts of adventurers working alongside SI Set 7 and the kingdom's loyal forces to eventually uncover the conspiracy and bring down Van Cleef in his Deadmine's lair. But the damage had been done. Westfall remained a broken land for years, its fields untended and its people scattered. The Defias would continue to plague the region even after their founder's death, with Van Cleef's daughter Vanessa eventually taking up his cause. And through all of this, Onyxia remained at the heart of Stormwind's court, her true nature still unknown, her manipulations continuing to poison the kingdom from within. King Varian Wryn's story is one of the most remarkable in all of Azeroth's history. He was a man forged by tragedy, broken by loss, and ultimately redeemed through struggle and sacrifice. Varian's earliest memories were of happiness. He was the prince of a prosperous kingdom, the heir to a throne that seemed unshakable. His father, King Llane, was a wise and just ruler, beloved by his people. The young prince knew nothing of war or loss. All of that changed during the First War. Varian was still a boy when the Horde invaded, when his kingdom burned, when he watched his father murdered by Garona's blades. The trauma of that moment would shape him for the rest of his life. He fled Stormwind as a refugee, stripped of everything he had known, carried to safety by Anduin Lothar while his home crumbled behind him. In Lordaeron, the young prince grew into a warrior. He trained alongside the knights and soldiers who would fight the Second War, learning the arts of combat that would one day make him one of the deadliest fighters on Azeroth. He also learned leadership, watching how Lothar and Turalyon rallied the Alliance to victory. When Stormwind was rebuilt and Varian came of age, he was crowned king. He married Queen Tiffin, and together they had a son they named Anduin Llane Wryn, after both Varian's father and the great knight who had saved him. It seemed that Varian might finally find peace, but fate had other plans. The Stonemasons' betrayal, Onyxia's manipulations, the riots, Tiffin's death, the rise of the Defias, all of these crises plagued his reign. Varian became hardened by his losses, his gentle nature buried beneath layers of anger and grief. Then came the kidnapping. While on a diplomatic mission to Theramore, King Varian was abducted by the Defias Brotherhood on Onyxia's orders. On a place called Alkaz Island, the Black Dragon attempted to use magic to bring Varian under her control. But the spell was interrupted by an attack from Naga forces, and something unexpected happened. The botched magic split Varian into two separate beings. Both were Varian, but each embodied different aspects of his personality. One Varian was taken by the Naga, the other escaped into the sea. The Varian who escaped was suffering from amnesia. He had no memory of his identity, his kingdom, or his past. He was soon captured by Horde forces and enslaved as a gladiator in the Crimson Ring, a brutal arena in Dire Maul. There, fighting for survival, this Varian discovered reserves of strength and ferocity he had never known. He was teamed with two other unlikely allies, Brawl Bearmantle a night elf druid, and Valera Sanguinar, a blood elf rogue. Together, they became champions of the arena. The gladiator Varian's fighting prowess was so remarkable that the Tauren spectators gave him a name from their own language. They called him Logosh, meaning ghost wolf. It was the name of an ancient warrior hero from legends, and it fit this fierce and primal fighter perfectly. Meanwhile, back in Stormwind, the other Varian had returned to the throne. But this version of the king was different. He spent the kingdom's money frivolously, ignored matters of state, and acted erratically. The city fell into disarray. High Lord Bolvar Fordragon, serving as regent, tried to maintain order, but something was clearly wrong with the returned king. As Logosh and his companions escaped their captors and traveled across Azeroth, the gladiator began having flashes of memory. Slowly, he pieced together the truth. He was the missing king of Stormwind. His trusted advisor, Lady Katrana Prester, was actually a dragon in disguise, and she was behind all of his suffering. The confrontation came in Stormwind Keep itself. Logosh and his allies fought their way to the throne room, where he declared the masquerade was over and called Katrana by her true name, Onyxia. The black dragon revealed her true form, transforming guards into dragon spawn and attacking with all her terrible power. The battle raged through the Great Hall. Marshal Reginald Windsor, who had been instrumental in gathering evidence against Onyxia, was killed by the dragon during the fight. But the arrival of Bolvar Fordragon and young Prince Anduin turned the tide. During the chaos, the two Varians confronted each other. With the help of Jaina Proudmoore, the Archmage of Theramore, they came to understand what had happened. Onyxia's botched spell had literally divided Varian's soul between two bodies. Each was only half of what they should be. In the final moments of the battle, Onyxia accidentally used a spell that fused the two Varians back into one being. The reunified king possessed the tactical genius and nobility of his kingly self, combined with the warrior prowess and ferocity of Logosh. He was more complete than either half had been alone. Varian beheaded Onyxia and mounted her head on the ramparts of Stormwind Keep, where it remained as a warning to the kingdom's enemies. The dragon who had caused so much suffering was finally destroyed. The restored King Varian was different from the man who had been kidnapped. His time as Logosh had awakened something primal within him. He was more aggressive, more militant, a warrior king rather than just a ruler. His relationship with his son Anduin became strained, as father and son had very different views on war and peace. But Varian was also whole in a way he had not been since childhood. The rage that had consumed him after Tiffin's death was balanced by the warrior's discipline he had learned in the arena. He was finally able to process his losses without being destroyed by them. Under his restored rule, Stormwind entered a new era. The kingdom that had fallen and risen, that had been betrayed from within and without, that had lost and regained its king, now stood stronger than ever. And Varian himself had become the Wolf King, a legend whose story would inspire generations to come. Varian's return brought immediate changes to how Stormwind was governed. He had seen the consequences of a weak king during his absence, how his shadow self had let the kingdom drift toward ruin. He was determined that such a thing would never happen again. The restored king threw himself into the work of ruling with fierce dedication. Military reforms came first. Varian reorganized the army, instituting new training regimens based on what he had learned in the arena. He personally inspected the troops, something few kings before him had bothered to do. He promoted officers based on merit, rather than noble birth, angering some aristocrats, but earning the loyalty of common soldiers who now had paths to advancement. The rebuilding of trust with the people required a different approach. Varian knew that Onyxia's infiltration had happened partly because the nobility had grown too distant from the crown. He instituted regular audiences where any citizen could petition the king directly. He walked the streets of the capital without a massive guard, showing that he trusted his people and wanted to know their concerns. Relations with the other Alliance races received careful attention. Varian understood that Stormwind's survival had depended on the alliances forged during the Second War. He worked to strengthen ties with Ironforge, Gnomrigan, and the Elven kingdoms. When ambassadors came to his court, he received them with the respect their nations deserved, regardless of ancient prejudices. The young Prince Anduin watched all of this, learning what it meant to be king, even as he developed his own, very different style. Father and son disagreed on many things, but Anduin could not deny that Varian was an effective ruler. The kingdom prospered, and the people felt safe for the first time in years. To truly understand Stormwind, one must know its physical form, the magnificent city that has been built and rebuilt over the centuries. The capital is a marvel of human engineering, a testament to the skill of the Stonemasons who constructed it and the vision of those who planned it. The city is made up of roughly rectangular districts, separated by a network of canals that flow with clear water throughout the urban landscape. These waterways give Stormwind a unique character, with bridges arching over the canals and small boats drifting between districts. The original design called for gondolas to carry citizens from place to place, like the famous boats of Venice in another world. Though the gondolas were never implemented, the beautiful canal system remained as one of the city's most distinctive features. The buildings of Stormwind are constructed primarily of white stone, giving the city its characteristic gleaming appearance. Blue-tiled roofs cap many structures, creating a harmonious blend of colors that can be seen from miles away. Gothic arches and medieval fortifications blend with Renaissance-style civic planning to create an architecture that is both beautiful and practical. At the heart of the city rises Stormwind Keep, the seat of power for the kingdom and the residence of the Rin dynasty. The keep is built partially upon a rocky outcropping, raising it above city level so that the king can look out over the masses he is sworn to protect. From the throne room, the ruler of Stormwind can see the entire city spread out below, a powerful reminder of what deserves to be defended. The throne room itself is a dome-shaped hall containing the great throne, flanked by golden lions. This seat of power is known as the Lion Seat, and it stands in the center of the room, surrounded by the royal guard. The golden throne is adorned with stained glass, through which light filters in shifting patterns. As Matthias Shaw once observed, the Rin line intimidates as much as it inspires, and that is precisely the point. Beyond the throne room lies the war room, where military strategy is planned and campaigns are coordinated. A royal library serves the kingdom's scholars and curious citizens alike. Private chambers house the king and his family, along with guest quarters for important visitors. A small armory contains extremely rare pieces of equipment, relics of the kingdom's long history. The Rin rulers have always maintained a tradition of allowing public access to the keep. Citizens may enter and petition their king, a practice that concerns SI-27 from a security standpoint, but reflects the royal family's commitment to remaining close to their people. The Cathedral of Light rises in Cathedral Square, and while Stormwind Keep may be the largest structure in the city, many consider the cathedral to be the most awe-inspiring. Its spires reach toward the heavens, its halls echo with hymns and prayers, and within its sacred spaces train the most faithful paladins and priests of humanity. The cathedral serves as the spiritual heart of Stormwind, and indeed of the entire Alliance. It is here that the teachings of the Holy Light are preserved and passed on to new generations. The wounded come here for healing, the troubled come for counsel, and the faithful come to renew their dedication to the Light's principles. The trade district bustles with commerce from across the continent and beyond. Merchants from every corner of Azeroth come here to buy and sell their wares. The Bank of Stormwind secures the wealth of the kingdom, while auction houses allow adventurers to trade equipment and treasures. This is the economic heart of Stormwind, where gold flows like the water in the canals. The streets of the trade district are alive with activity from dawn until well past dusk. Vendors call out their wares from colorful stalls lining the main thoroughfares. Blacksmiths display weapons and armor for adventurers preparing to venture into dangerous lands. Tailors offer fine garments and enchanted robes. Alchemists sell potions and elixirs from shops fragrant with exotic herbs. The auction houses are perhaps the most fascinating institutions in the district. Here, rare artifacts recovered from ancient ruins exchange hands. Weapons touched by dragonfire, armor worn by legendary heroes, gems that glow with inner light, all find their way to the auction blocks. Fortunes are made and lost in bidding wars that can last for days. The Bank of Stormwind stands as one of the most secure buildings in the entire kingdom. Its vaults extend deep beneath the city, protected by magical wards and vigilant guards. Citizens from across the Alliance store their valuables here, trusting the institution that has safeguarded wealth since before the First War. The original bank was destroyed when Stormwind fell, but the reconstruction was one of the highest priorities, and the new facility was built to even more exacting standards. Street performers entertain the crowds at major intersections. Jugglers, fire eaters, bards singing of ancient heroes, they add color and life to the already vibrant district. Children weave through the crowds, running errands for their parents, or simply enjoying the excitement of the marketplace. At night, the trade district takes on a different character. The shops close, but the taverns open their doors wide. Musicians play in the corners, while patrons enjoy food and drink. Deals that cannot be made in daylight are concluded in shadowed booths. Not everything traded in Stormwind is entirely legal, but the guards maintain order, and most business is conducted honestly enough. Old Town is where adventurers of every sort can be found wandering the streets. It has a rougher character than the other districts, with taverns like the Pig and Whistle serving as gathering places for those who live by the sword. Hidden among the aging buildings is the headquarters of SI-7, Stormwind's elite intelligence agency. SI-7 has a long and shadowy history, Long before any of the Great Wars, Stormwind's rulers recognized that some tasks could not be accomplished within the bounds of law. A thief named Pathonia Shaw, grandmother of the current spy master, was approached and offered clemency in exchange for forming a society to handle the kingdom's dirty work. The Stormwind assassins began that day, and they eventually evolved into SI-7, the most elite spy organization on Azeroth. Today, under the leadership of Spy Master Matthias Shaw, SI-7 handles special operations, espionage, and covert actions throughout the world. Their agents operate wherever Alliance interests require a subtle touch, gathering intelligence and eliminating threats before they can grow dangerous. The Mage Quarter lies in the southern corner of the city. Here, the Wizard's Sanctum houses portals to most major Alliance cities, allowing magical transportation across vast distances. The infamous Slaughtered Lamb Tavern caters to a more esoteric clientele, its basement hiding secrets that respectable citizens prefer not to know about. Beneath the canals, accessible from the Mage Quarter, lies the Stormwind Stockade. This high-security prison holds everyone from petty criminals to the most dangerous murderers and political insurgents in the land. Presided over by Warden Thelwater, the stockade has seen its share of riots and escape attempts over the years. True criminals from across Stormwind's territories are sent here for trial and punishment. The Dwarven District was established after the Second War to house all the workers sent by King Magni Bronzebeard of Ironforge to help rebuild Stormwind. The constant haze from the forges fills the air, supplemented by the steady rhythm of smiths' hammers striking metal. Many adventurers pass through this district on their way to the Deep Run tram, a marvel of gnomish engineering that provides fast transport to Ironforge through tunnels that pass beneath the mountains and even under the sea. The dwarves who came to help rebuild Stormwind fell in love with the city and chose to stay. They brought their traditions with them, establishing a community that felt like a little piece of Ironforge in the human capital. The taverns here serve dwarven ale, strong enough to make even the hardiest human's eyes water. The food is hearty and filling, with roasted meats and thick stews that fuel a day's hard labor at the forge. The smiths of the Dwarven District are among the finest in the kingdom. Their weapons and armor are prized by warriors and adventurers who understand that quality metalwork can mean the difference between life and death. The Dwarven tradition of craftsmanship stretches back thousands of years, and these artisans carry on techniques passed down through countless generations. The Deep Run tram itself is a wonder of engineering. When King Magni proposed connecting Ironforge and Stormwind with an underground railway, many thought the idea impossible. The distance between the two cities spans hundreds of miles, crossing under mountains and beneath the sea. But gnomish engineers designed the system, dwarven miners carved the tunnels, and human laborers helped with construction. The result was a transit system that can move passengers between the two capitals in a matter of minutes, a journey that would otherwise take weeks on horseback. The tram cars are marvels of mechanical precision. Powered by steam and gnomish technology, they race through the tunnels at speeds that seem almost magical. Windows allow passengers to glimpse the underwater portions of the route, where fish swim past, and occasionally curious sea creatures peer in at the travelers. Children especially love these glimpses of the deep, pressing their faces against the glass to spot sharks and whales. The district also houses the military ward, where the city's defenders train and prepare for battle. Barracks accommodate the soldiers who serve in Stormwind's army. Training grounds echo with the clash of practice weapons and the shouts of drill sergeants. Here, young men and women learn the skills they will need to defend their kingdom against whatever threats may come. The Valley of Heroes serves as the southern entrance to Stormwind. A stone bridge crosses a narrow moat, and on either side of the path stand the 5 massive statues commemorating the Alliance expedition to Draenor. General Turalyon, Illyria Windrunner, Danath Trollbane, Curdrin Wildhammer, and Archmage Khadgar stand forever in stone, welcoming visitors, while providing an awe-inspiring reminder of the sacrifices that have preserved the city. Stormwind Harbor was added to the city's northwestern area in more recent years, constructed to facilitate the campaign against the Lich King in Northrend. The harbor gatehouse was built by human, dwarven, and gnomish workers under the supervision of Foreman Wick. Ships now sail regularly to distant shores, and the Stormwind harbor guards patrol the docks and waters to keep the area secure. The harbor's construction was a massive undertaking that required reshaping the coastline itself. Seawalls were built to create protected docking areas. Cranes and loading equipment were installed to facilitate the movement of cargo. Warehouses rose along the waterfront to store supplies bound for distant battlefields. The entire project took years to complete, but the result was a facility capable of supporting the largest naval operations in Alliance history. The ships that dock here range from small fishing vessels to massive military transports. Merchant ships carry goods from Kultiras, Menethil Harbor, and ports across the continent. Military vessels stand ready to deploy troops wherever they are needed. The harbor never truly sleeps. Even in the darkest hours of the night, crews load and unload cargo, sailors prepare for voyages, and the watch keeps vigilant eyes on the approaches to the city. For visitors arriving by sea, the harbor provides their first impression of Stormwind. The white walls of the city rise before them as their ship enters the harbor. The lion banners snap in the coastal wind. The sounds of the great city carry across the water. Bells from the cathedral, the hum of commerce, the occasional trumpet call from the keep. It is a sight that has brought tears to the eyes of returning soldiers and filled new arrivals with wonder. The district has developed its own character over the years. Taverns cater to sailors with tales to tell and thirsts to quench. Shops sell nautical supplies, maps, and curiosities from distant lands. The smell of salt air mingles with the scent of fish from the morning's catch. Children play along the wharves, dreaming of adventures beyond the horizon. The Park District once occupied the western corner of the city. It was a place of leisure and natural beauty. And when night elves began visiting Stormwind, they found the comforting presence of trees and gardens to be a welcome respite. A moonwell was created in the center of the park square, bringing a touch of night elven magic to the human capital. But the park was destroyed by Deathwing during the Cataclysm, obliterated by the Mad Dragon's assault. For years, the district remained in ruins, a scar on the city's beautiful form. Eventually, in the wake of further tragedy, it was transformed into something new, Lion's Rest, a memorial to those lost in the war against the Burning Legion. The years following Varian's restoration brought both triumph and tragedy to Stormwind. The city stood as the heart of the Alliance as new threats emerged and old enemies returned. But for a brief time, there was peace, and the people of Stormwind could breathe easier knowing that their king had returned. The kingdom prospered under Varian's restored rule. The Defias Brotherhood had been dealt a significant blow with Van Cleef's death, though remnants continued to plague Westfall. Trade routes were secured. The army was strengthened and trained. Stormwind resumed its position as the most powerful human kingdom in Azeroth, a beacon of hope for the Alliance. The years following Varian's restoration saw the kingdom enter a period of relative stability. The harvest festivals returned to the villages of Elwyn, with farmers celebrating yields that had not been seen since before the Defias raids. The markets of Goldshire bustled with travelers heading to and from the capital. Even the troubled regions of Westfall began showing signs of recovery as the Defias threat diminished. In the city itself, life took on a rhythm of normalcy that felt almost miraculous after so many years of turmoil. Shopkeepers opened their doors each morning with confidence. Children played in the streets without their parents fearing for their safety. The cathedral bells marked the hours, and citizens went about their daily routines as generations before them had done. The cultural life of Stormwind flourished during this period. Bards composed new songs celebrating the kingdom's resilience and its hero king. Artists painted murals depicting the city's reconstruction, scenes of workers laying stone and raising walls that now adorned public buildings. Scholars at the library cataloged the histories of the recent wars, determined that future generations would remember both the sacrifices and the victories. The relationship between Stormwind and its alliance partners grew stronger. Dwarven engineers arrived to help improve the city's infrastructure, sharing techniques that had served Ironforge for millennia. Gnomish inventors contributed devices that made daily life easier, from improved street lamps to more efficient water pumps for the canal system. Even the Night Elves, traditionally isolated, began sending emissaries to learn about human culture and share their own ancient wisdom. Prince Anduin grew under his father's watchful eye, though the two were very different in temperament. Varian was a warrior, forged by battle and loss into a weapon of righteous fury. Anduin was more contemplative, drawn to the teachings of the light and the wisdom of priests rather than the clash of swords. This difference would become a source of tension between them, but also a source of growth as each learned from the other. The political situation required careful navigation. The alliance had been fractured by events that occurred during Varian's absence. Lord Bolvar Fordragon had served as regent, but the revelation of Onyxia's infiltration had shaken confidence in Stormwind's leadership. Varian had to rebuild trust while also preparing for the threats he knew were coming. The Lich King's power had been growing in the frozen wastes of Northrend. The undead legions of the Scourge attacked Stormwind itself, pouring through portals and assaulting the city streets. King Varian fought alongside High Lord Bolvar Fordragon to repel the invasion, and after a long and desperate battle in Stormwind Harbor, the undead were driven back. The Scourge invasion had been a wake-up call for the entire alliance. The Lich King had struck at their hearts, demonstrating that no city, no matter how well defended, was truly safe from his reach. The undead that had poured through the portals were not mindless creatures, but disciplined soldiers, coordinated in their assault, targeting key positions with military precision. The citizens of Stormwind, who had lived through the attack, would never forget the horror of that day. Ghouls swarming through the streets, their rotting flesh and empty eyes the stuff of nightmares. Abominations, massive amalgamations of corpses sewn together, smashing through barricades. The cries of the wounded and dying mixing with the hollow moans of the undead. Even after the invasion was repelled, many suffered nightmares, jumping at shadows, seeing threats in every dark corner. The city guard had fought valiantly, but they had been unprepared for such an assault. In the aftermath, Varian ordered a complete overhaul of the city's defenses. New wards were placed at key entry points, designed to detect and repel undead intrusion. Watch rotations were increased. The citizens themselves were trained in basic defensive measures, so that if another attack came, everyone would know what to do. The harbor, where the fiercest fighting had taken place, was reinforced with additional fortifications. The waters around Stormwind were patrolled more frequently. The lesson of the Scourge attack was clear. The war against the Lich King could not be fought at a distance. Either the Alliance would take the battle to Northrend, or the Scourge would continue to bring the battle to them. Varian founded the Valiant's expedition to carry the war to Northrend itself. He sent Bolvar to oversee the creation of a forward base at Angrathar, the Wrathgate, a massive gate that served as the rear entrance to Icecrown Citadel, the Lich King's fortress. The Battle of Angrathar became one of the most tragic events in Alliance history. Bolvar's forces laid siege to the gate, and for a moment, victory seemed possible. Bolvar himself confronted the Lich King, standing defiant before the Lord of the Undead. Then treachery struck. Grand Apothecary Putris of the Forsaken appeared with catapults loaded with a new plague, and he attacked everyone, Alliance, Horde, and Scourge alike. The terrible blight killed thousands in moments. Bolvar ordered a retreat, but he was caught in the plague's spread. The red dragonflight arrived and used their fire to burn away the blight, but in doing so, they also burned Bolvar. His body was blackened, his veins glowing with golden fire, preserved in unbearable agony by the dragon flame. He was neither truly alive nor truly dead, and though his forces believed him slain, his fate was far stranger than death. Varian learned that the plague attack had been orchestrated by the Dreadlord Varimathras and Putris, not by the Horde's official leadership. But his rage at the betrayal was too great for such distinctions. He declared war on the Horde and sought to strengthen Stormwind's military power against all enemies. Under Varian's leadership, the Alliance ultimately achieved victory against the Lich King. The Argent Crusade, with heroes from both Alliance and Horde, assaulted Icecrown Citadel and destroyed the Master of the Scourge. What few knew was that Bolvar Fordragon, still somehow alive in his burned and ruined body, had taken up the crown of the Lich King to prevent the Scourge from running rampant without a master. He became the new Lich King, not as a force of conquest, but as a jailer who would hold the undead in check. The Cataclysm struck without warning. Deathwing, the corrupted dragon aspect, who had once been Neltharion the Earthwarder, burst from the elemental plane of Deepholm and wreaked havoc across Azeroth. Continents were reshaped, zones were sundered, and chaos spread across the world. Stormwind was not spared. Deathwing himself attacked the city, crashing down upon the gates with apocalyptic force. The Park District was obliterated, blown away in an instant of destructive fury. The front towers still bear the claw marks from the dragon's assault, scars that remain visible to this day. In the aftermath of Deathwing's attack, Stormwind underwent extensive renovations. The streets were repaved, new alleyways were carved out to improve movement through the city, and Stormwind Keep received a grand new entrance complete with a statue atop a fountain. The damage from the Cataclysm was repaired, though the Park District remained in ruins for years. The war against Deathwing was long and costly, but ultimately the dragon was defeated. Heroes wielding the dragon's soul, an ancient artifact, managed to destroy the corrupted aspect before he could complete his plan to unmake Azeroth. Portions of Deathwing's metal-encased jaw were brought to the Eastern Earth Shrine in Stormwind, commemorating the victory over one of the greatest threats the world had ever faced. The discovery of Pandaria, a land hidden by mists for 10,000 years, brought new conflicts and new opportunities. It also tested King Varian's growth as a leader in ways he had never anticipated. The Horde, under Warchief Garrosh Hellscream, had become increasingly aggressive and tyrannical. Garrosh's lust for power led him to Pandaria's shores, where he sought to claim the continent's resources for the Horde. His actions grew ever more extreme. He attempted to use an artifact called the Divine Bell to empower his soldiers. He committed violence against the trolls of his own faction, and his warmongering caused the Blood Elves to be expelled from the neutral city of Dalaran. King Varian led the Alliance response to Garrosh's aggression. The conflict in Pandaria was brutal, with battles raging across the ancient land as both factions fought for control. But as Garrosh's tyranny grew, something unexpected happened. The Horde itself began to fracture. Vol'jin of the Darkspear Trolls had seen enough. He set about uniting dissenting Horde leaders under the banner of the Darkspear Rebellion. The Alliance, which had also suffered from Garrosh's warmongering, found itself aiding Vol'jin's uprising, creating the strange spectacle of Alliance and Horde forces fighting side by side against a common enemy. High King Varian rallied the Alliance war fleet and managed to breach Garrosh's blockade of Orgrimmar. Reinforcements from Stormwind, Dalaran, New Tinkertown, and Ironforge converged on the Orcish capital. The siege of Orgrimmar saw combined Alliance and Rebel Horde forces storm the city, driving deep into its underground reaches to confront the Mad Warchief. Garrosh was defeated and captured. Brought before King Varian, he awaited judgment for his crimes. Jaina Proudmoore, who had once counseled peace between the factions, now advised Varian to dismantle the Horde once and for all. The moment of vengeance was at hand, but Varian chose differently. Looking at Vol'jin and the Horde rebels who had fought alongside the Alliance, he made a decision that surprised everyone, perhaps including himself. He did not order the Horde's destruction. Instead, he left the newly appointed Warchief Vol'jin with a warning. If the Horde failed to uphold honor, the Alliance would return to finish what had been started. Varian explained that continuing the war would prove too costly for everyone. It was a decision of wisdom over vengeance, of pragmatism over rage. The warrior king who had sworn vengeance against the Horde for so many wrongs had found it within himself to choose peace. Young Prince Anduin witnessed his father's choice and was proud of what he saw. The king who had been divided and reunited, who had spent years consumed by anger, had finally grown beyond his pain. The ghost wolf had found his humanity. The peace was short-lived. Garrosh escaped custody and traveled to an alternate timeline's Draenor, where he prevented the orcs of that world from drinking demon blood. He created the Iron Horde, an army of untainted orcs equipped with advanced technology, and led them through a new dark portal to invade Azeroth. The Iron Horde's Iron March forces conquered the blasted lands in just a few days, destroying Netherguard Keep and threatening to advance on Stormwind itself. They reached Blackrock Mountain and attempted to construct a device that would cause the volcano to erupt, which would have devastated the entire region, including the capital. Varian declared war on the Iron Horde and formed an alliance expedition to stop them. Working with heroes from across Azeroth, the threat was neutralized both on Azeroth and on the alternate Draenor, where the expedition pursued the Iron Horde to end the threat at its source. The Burning Legion had never truly been defeated, only delayed. Their third invasion of Azeroth began when the orc warlock Gul'dan opened a massive portal in the tomb of Sargeras, allowing the Legion's armies to pour into the world once more. The Legion had been plotting this invasion for millennia. Sargeras, the Dark Titan who had fallen from grace and dedicated himself to the destruction of all life, commanded forces beyond counting. His demons had destroyed countless worlds across the cosmos, and now they turned their full attention to Azeroth. The world soul sleeping within the planet was too valuable to ignore, too dangerous to leave intact. The fell energies that poured through the portal corrupted everything they touched. The Broken Isles, where the tomb of Sargeras stood, became a nightmarish landscape of demonic fortifications and twisted magic. Ships attempting to approach were attacked by fillbats and infernals. The sky itself seemed to burn with green fire as the Legion established its beachhead. News of the invasion spread quickly across Azeroth. Veterans of previous conflicts with the Legion recognized the threat immediately. This was not a minor incursion to be handled by local forces. This was the full might of the Burning Legion, the same force that had nearly destroyed the world during the War of the Ancients and had brought the orcs to Azeroth through the Dark Portal. The threat was greater than anything Azeroth had faced since the War of the Ancients 10,000 years before. The Alliance and Horde, putting aside their recent conflicts, mounted a joint assault on the Broken Shore to close the portal and stop the invasion at its source. King Varian led the Alliance forces into battle alongside Gen Greymane of Gilneas, Gelban Mekatork of Gnomrigan, and Jaina Proudmoore of the Kirin Tor. The Horde was led by Warchief Vol'jin and Sylvanas, Windrunner. Together, they believed they could end the Legion's invasion before it truly began. The fleet that set sail from Stormwind Harbor was the largest the city had ever assembled. Ships of every size filled the waters, their decks crowded with soldiers, mages, priests, and champions from across the Alliance. The lion banners flew proudly from every mast, a defiant statement of purpose against the demonic enemy. From the walls of Stormwind, citizens watched their defenders depart, many offering prayers to the light for their safe return. They could not know that many of those ships and many of those soldiers would never come home again. The battle was a disaster. The Legion had prepared for their assault, and they met the combined forces with overwhelming power. Fellbats swarmed the ships, their leathery wings darkening the sky. Infernals rained destruction from above, each impact sending shockwaves through the Allied lines. Fell cannons bombarded the beaches where troops attempted to establish a foothold. The Argent Crusade's forces were decimated during the initial landing, their silver and gold banners falling one by one, and High Lord Tyrion Fordring himself was taken captive by demons who recognized the legendary paladin. Unknown to the Alliance, the Horde forces were being overwhelmed by a devastating flanking attack from a hidden demon portal that opened behind their lines. Thrall was blasted by concentrated fire from Legion ships, his elemental powers barely keeping him alive. Warchief Vol'jin was mortally wounded by a Felguard's spear that pierced through his defenses. Seeing the situation becoming hopeless and her leaders falling around her, Sylvanas Windrunner blew her warhorn, signaling a full retreat. From the Alliance's perspective, it appeared that the Horde had abandoned them at the crucial moment. Varian watched in fury as the Horde forces withdrew, leaving the Alliance trapped and surrounded. The Alliance began its own desperate retreat to the gunship Skyfire, but escape would not be easy. A massive Fel Reaver grabbed hold of the ship, threatening to bring it crashing down with everyone aboard. If the Skyfire fell, the Alliance leadership would be destroyed, and with them, any hope of organized resistance against the Legion. King Varian made his decision in an instant. He reached up and handed Gen Greymane a letter, saying simply, "Take this to my son." Greymane nodded, understanding what Varian intended to do. Varian leapt from the ladder, sword in hand. In a single motion, he drove his blade through the Fel Reaver's armored head, breaking its grip on the Skyfire. The gunship pulled away to safety, carrying the surviving Alliance forces, but Varian remained behind on the Broken Shore. Alone against an army of demons, Varian fought. He cut down every monster that came at him, his sword flashing in the fell green light. He killed countless demons, making his way toward Gul'dan himself. But even the Ghost Wolf could not defeat the Legion alone. 3 demon blades impaled him from behind, yet still he refused to fall. Gul'dan approached, gloating that the king would be remembered as one who sacrificed his life for nothing. Varian looked the warlock in the eyes. His voice was steady, defiant, unbroken even in death. For the Alliance, Gul'dan, perhaps annoyed by the king's courage, channeled overwhelming fell energy into Varian's body. The King of Stormwind, the warrior who had been divided and made whole, the father who had been trying so hard to become better, was utterly destroyed. His body disintegrated in fell fire, leaving nothing behind but the memory of his sacrifice. Varian died as he had lived, fighting for his people, protecting those he loved. His sacrifice allowed the Alliance forces to escape. The wolf had finally stopped running and made his final stand. The news of Varian's death reached Stormwind like a thunderbolt. Prince Anduin Rin, who had been too young to fight in the Broken Shore battle, received his father's letter from Gen Greymane. The young man who had always advocated for peace, who had disagreed with his father on so many matters, now had to become king during his people's darkest hour. The streets of Stormwind fell silent when the news spread. Shops closed, markets emptied, citizens gathered in Cathedral Square, seeking comfort in the light, seeking answers that no one could provide. Their king was dead. The warrior who had survived kidnapping, survived being split in two, survived the siege of Orgrimmar and countless battles. He was gone. A state funeral was held for Varian, though there was no body to bury. The letter he had written to Anduin was read aloud before the assembled nobles and citizens. In it, Varian spoke of his pride in his son, of his hopes for the kingdom, of his love for the people he had served. The words brought tears to eyes throughout the cathedral. Anduin read the letter through blurred vision, his hands trembling. His father, who had seemed so invincible, who had been the rock upon which Anduin's own identity was formed in opposition, was gone. All the arguments they had had, all the times Anduin had wished his father would understand him better, all of that seemed so small now. He would have given anything for one more conversation, one more chance to tell his father that he loved him. The coronation followed shortly after the funeral. Anduin knelt before the altar of the Cathedral of Light, and Archbishop Benedictus placed the crown upon his head. He rose as King Anduin Rhin, Lord of Stormwind, High King of the Alliance. He was 18 years old. Anduin was different from Varian in almost every way. Where Varian was a warrior, Anduin was a priest. Where Varian solved problems with strength, Anduin sought diplomatic solutions. Where Varian had been shaped by rage and violence, Anduin was guided by the light and compassion. Yet Anduin had his father's courage and his own kind of strength. He accepted the crown not with joy, but with solemn determination. Stormwind needed a king, and he would be that king, even if the role seemed impossibly large for his young shoulders. The war against the Burning Legion continued. Class orders formed across Azeroth, gathering heroes who wielded ancient artifact weapons against the demonic invasion. The Pillars of Creation were sought to seal the tomb of Sargeras. Slowly, painfully, the Legion was pushed back. During this war, hope arrived from an unexpected source. Turalyon and Ilaria Windrunner, the lost heroes who had disappeared when Draenor was destroyed, finally returned. They had encountered a powerful being called Zera and joined the Army of the Light, fighting the Legion across the cosmos for what they experienced as 1,000 years. Due to the strange nature of time in the twisting nether, far less time had passed on Azeroth. Their return brought powerful allies with vast experience fighting the Legion. Turalyon's leadership and Illyria's mastery of unusual powers would prove valuable in the battles to come. It also meant that the statues in the Valley of Heroes, long memorials to heroes believed dead, now honored warriors who had returned from the void. The Legion was ultimately defeated. Sargeras himself was imprisoned by the combined power of the Titans, though not before he plunged his sword into the world of Azeroth, wounding the planet's very world soul. Victory had come, but at tremendous cost. King Anduin gave a hopeful speech at Lion's Rest, the memorial that had been constructed on the site of the destroyed park. He spoke of his father's sacrifice and of the Alliance's resilience. He looked toward a future where peace might finally be possible, but that peace would not come easily. The discovery of Azerite, a powerful substance that was essentially the blood of Azeroth herself, created new tensions. Both Alliance and Horde sought to claim this resource, and the competition quickly escalated into open conflict. The Fourth War began with an act of unimaginable cruelty. Warchief Sylvanas Windrunner led the Horde in a campaign to secure Kalimdor by capturing Darnassus, the Night Elven capital. The plan was to hold the city hostage to prevent Alliance reinforcement of the continent. But the plan went awry when Malfurion Stormrage escaped death at the hands of High Overlord Sourfang. Frustrated that her political objectives had been undermined, Sylvanas made a terrible decision. She ordered Teldrassil, the world tree that held the Night Elven capital, to be burned. Thousands of Night Elves died in the flames. Civilians, children, the elderly, all perished as the massive tree became an inferno. The sky glowed orange for days, visible from great distances. It was an atrocity beyond anything the Horde had done since their demon-corrupted days. There was little Anduin could do to prevent the surprise attack. He recalled the Alliance fleet, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. All he could do was assist with the evacuation and make room in Stormwind for the refugees who had lost everything. Stormwind City became home to a massive population of displaced Night Elves and Gilnean Worgen who had been living in Darnassus. For years, these refugees would remain in the human capital, their presence a constant reminder of the Horde's atrocity. The influx of refugees strained Stormwind's resources to the breaking point. Camps were established in every open space. The Cathedral Square became a shelter for hundreds of families. The trade district's inns were packed beyond capacity. Every warehouse, every stable, every spare room in the city was pressed into service to house those who had lost everything. The Night Elves, who were accustomed to the forests and moonlight of Teldrassil, found the stone streets and crowded buildings of Stormwind disorienting. Many struggled to adapt to the human city's rhythms, its noise, its constant activity. They mourned their lost home, their ancient trees, the world they had known for 10,000 years. The Gilnean Worgen, who had already been refugees once when they fled their cursed homeland, now found themselves displaced again. They had rebuilt their lives in Darnassus, had found a measure of peace among the Night Elves. Now that was gone too. Anduin did everything he could to ease their suffering. He ordered the construction of temporary housing. He opened the royal treasury to provide food and supplies. He visited the refugee camps personally, offering what comfort he could to those who had lost everything. But he knew that words and gestures could not replace what had been taken from them. The Night Elves wanted vengeance. Tyrande Whisperwind, their high priestess and leader, demanded that Anduin authorize a full-scale assault on the Horde. She wanted Sylvanas dead, wanted the Horde to suffer as her people had suffered. When Anduin counseled patience, planning, and coordination with the Alliance's other members, Tyrande grew frustrated. She would eventually take matters into her own hands, undergoing a dangerous ritual to become the Night Warrior, an avatar of Elun's wrath. With this power, she led her own forces to attack the Horde in Darkshore, seeking to reclaim what had been lost and avenge those who had died. In response to Teldrassil's burning, Anduin led an assault on the Undercity, seeking to capture Sylvanas and bring her to justice for genocide. The attack was initially successful, but Sylvanas had prepared for this eventuality. Rather than let the Undercity fall into Alliance hands, she blighted the entire city, making it uninhabitable for anyone. The Fourth War raged across Azeroth as in Kul Tiras, Anduin sought alliance with the Seafaring Kingdom, eventually winning their support. The Proudmoore family, who had long ties to the Alliance through Jaina, Proudmoore welcomed the restorations of formal bonds. Kul Tiras brought its legendary navy to the Alliance's aid, ships that had been sailing the Great Sea since before the First War. The addition of the island nation's maritime power would prove crucial In the conflicts to come, war fronts erupted in the Arathi Highlands and Darkshore, with night elves seeking vengeance for their destroyed home. The fighting was brutal and grinding, with territory changing hands repeatedly as both factions poured resources into these contested zones. In Darkshore, the Night Elves fought with a fury born of grief and rage, determined to reclaim every inch of their shattered territory. The forests that had once echoed with peaceful nature, sounds now rang with the clash of weapons and the cries of the wounded. Stormwind served as the Alliance's nerve center throughout the conflict. War councils met regularly in the keep, coordinating operations across multiple fronts. Supplies flowed through the harbor, bound for troops fighting in distant lands. Wounded soldiers were brought back to the city's hospitals, where priests and healers worked around the clock to save those who could be saved. The economic toll of the Fourth War was significant. The treasury that had been carefully built up over years of peace now drained rapidly to fund military operations. Taxes increased, though Anduin tried to shield the poorest citizens from the burden. Manufacturing shifted toward military production as civilian goods became secondary to the needs of war. The war finally ended when Sourfang, the orc who had refused to kill Malfurion and had grown to hate what the Horde had become, challenged Sylvanas to mech Gora, a traditional orcish duel. Sylvanas killed him, but not before he forced her to reveal her true feelings. "The Horde is nothing," she screamed. "You are all nothing." In that moment, her forces saw the truth. Sylvanas had never cared about the Horde. She had used them for her own purposes, and now she abandoned them. She tore open a gateway into the Shadowlands, the realm of death, and disappeared. Peace returned to Azeroth, fragile and tentative. But new horrors awaited in the realm of death itself. The Shadowlands were the realm where mortal souls traveled after death, sorted into various afterlives based on their nature and deeds. But something had gone terribly wrong with the system that governed this realm, and a being called the Jailer was working to escape his eternal prison. Sylvanas had allied herself with the Jailer, and together they had been manipulating events for years. Now, with a gateway torn open to the Shadowlands, the Jailer's forces began kidnapping leaders from Azeroth. King Anduin was among those taken. He was brought to the Maw, the darkest realm of the Shadowlands, a prison meant for the most irredeemable souls. There, he became a prisoner of Sylvanas and the Jailer. The news of Anduin's disappearance sent shockwaves through Stormwind. The king who had led them through the Legion invasion, who had stood firm during the Fourth War, who had offered hope in the darkest times, he was gone. The throne sat empty once more, and the people of Stormwind faced yet another crisis without their sovereign. The House of Nobles met in emergency session. The military leaders gathered in the war room. Everyone agreed that the kingdom needed leadership, but who could possibly take Varian's place? Take Anduin's place? The line of Rin seemed to have reached its end, at least until Anduin could be rescued. The debate raged for days. Various nobles put forward their own names, their own candidates. Some argued for a council of regents. Others suggested that Gen Greymane, who had been Anduin's closest advisor and something of a father figure since Varian's death, should take command. But Gen was king of Gilneas, and his first duty had to be to his own displaced people. In the end, the choice fell upon an unlikely candidate, High Exarch Turalyon, the legendary hero who had returned from the cosmos. Turalyon had no political ambitions. He had spent 1,000 years fighting demons, not learning the intricacies of court politics. But he was respected by all, his honor beyond question, and his experience as a military commander would serve the kingdom well during troubled times. With the king missing, Stormwind needed leadership. The House of Nobles, working with the Alliance's military leaders, appointed Turalyon as regent and protector of Stormwind. The ancient hero who had fought in the Second War, who had led the Sons of Lothar, who had spent 1,000 years battling the Legion, now found himself governing a kingdom. Anduin's fate was far worse than simple imprisonment. The jailer used ancient domination magic to break the young king's will and turn him into a weapon. Using a remnant of Arthas Menethil's soul and reshaping Anduin's sword, Charlemagne into a Mournablade called Kingsmourn, the jailer enslaved Anduin just as Arthas had once been enslaved by Frostmourne. Under the jailer's control, Anduin was forced to commit terrible acts. He attacked his own allies, unable to resist the dark power that compelled him. The priest, who had dedicated his life to the light, became an instrument of death. But Anduin fought the domination from within. Slowly, painfully, he struggled against the chains on his will. When he saw visions of his father Varian and of Saurfang, they reminded him that Charlemagne's legacy was one of valor and honor, not darkness. With their help, Anduin found the strength to split the corrupted sword in half, returning it to its original forms of Shalator and Elamain. This act freed him from domination and released what was left of Arthas's fading soul. The jailer was ultimately defeated by the combined efforts of heroes from both Alliance and Horde, but the cost to Anduin was tremendous. He had lost his connection to the light. His faith had been shaken to its core. The power that had defined him as a priest was gone. When the crisis ended, Anduin could not bring himself to return to Stormwind. He told Gen Greymane that he trusted Turalyon to keep the kingdom and the Alliance safe in his absence. The young king who had inherited the throne during the Legion invasion now walked away from it, too traumatized to lead. Turalyon continued as regent, proving to be a capable administrator despite having no taste for politics. His experience and steady hand provided stability during uncertain times. He and Ilaria had been taking time apart, their relationship strained by their opposing powers of light and void, but both remained dedicated to the Alliance's welfare. Years passed. The Night Elven and Worgen refugees who had filled Stormwind's streets finally departed when a new world tree called Amerdrassil was grown, giving them a home at last. The city that had been bursting with displaced peoples returned to something closer to normalcy. The departure of the refugees was bittersweet. For years, the Night Elves and Worgen had lived alongside the humans of Stormwind, sharing meals, working together, and forming bonds that transcended racial boundaries. Children had grown up playing with friends from other races. Merchants had formed business partnerships. Priests and druids had exchanged knowledge about their different spiritual traditions. When the time came to leave, many found it difficult to say goodbye. The night elves who had watched the sunrise over Stormwind's white walls, who had learned to appreciate human music and art, who had found unexpected comfort among these short-lived but passionate people, they carried memories of their time in the city that they would treasure for millennia. The Worgen, who had been refugees twice over, felt deep gratitude toward a kingdom that had opened its doors when they had nowhere else to go. Ceremonies were held to mark the departure. King Anduin, via message, expressed his hope that the bonds formed during their shared trials would endure. Turalyon spoke of the honor it had been to host such worthy allies. Night Elven leaders planted the trees throughout the city, living memorials that would grow for generations as reminders of the time when three peoples had become one community. The city felt quieter after they left. Streets that had been crowded were suddenly spacious. Inns that had been packed now had empty rooms. But life slowly filled the vacuum. Stormwindians who had postponed families during the crowded years now felt comfortable having children. Businesses expanded into spaces that had been occupied by refugee services. The city found a new equilibrium. When the Dragon Isles awakened and the dragons invited mortal races to visit their ancient homeland, Turalyon represented Stormwind's interests. New adventures began, new threats emerged, but through it all, the regent kept the kingdom secure. Anduin eventually began a journey of healing. Found by thrall in Silithus, the former High King started to work through the trauma of his domination. The war against the void that threatens Azeroth's underground realms has drawn him back into the world's affairs, though he still does not sit upon the throne of Stormwind. The city awaits its king's return, but it does not wait idly. Stormwind continues to serve as the capital of the Alliance, the strongest bastion of humanity, the most powerful force in the coalition of races that stand against the darkness. To understand Stormwind is to understand its culture, the traditions and values that have sustained its people through centuries of triumph and tragedy. The lion is the symbol of Stormwind, appearing on banners and flags, carved into statues throughout the city, flanking the great throne in the keep. The lion's seat itself takes its name from the golden lions that guard it. Anduin Lothar was called the Lion of Azeroth, and his legacy is woven into the very identity of the kingdom. When the Alliance of Lordaeron was formed, humans became the glue that held the coalition together. They were the most numerous and often the most diplomatic of the member races, bridging the gaps between dwarves and elves, between gnomes and humans from other kingdoms. Thus, the Lion of Stormwind was adopted as the symbol of the entire alliance, flying on banners from Ironforge to Darnassus. The people of Stormwind observe many festivals throughout the year. Remembrance Day honors the great heroes of the past, figures like Uther, the Lightbringer, and Anduin Lothar. The Day of the Dead sees people gathering in graveyards to celebrate and cherish the spirits of those they have lost. Volunteer Guard Day celebrates the hard work of the city guard, while Peon Day honors the peasants and workers who keep the kingdom functioning. Hallows End brings traditional celebrations that date back to Lordaeron's days, and since the Worgen of Gilneas joined the Alliance, the practice of burning a Wickerman has been reintroduced. Love is in the Air offers a romantic holiday celebrated throughout the kingdom. The Lunar Festival honors ancient wisdom and the changing of years. Noblegarden sees nobles and lords hiding coins, candy, and treasures within specially painted eggs scattered throughout the capital for citizens to find. Pilgrim's Bounty celebrates the harvest and the friendship between alliance races. The Feast of Winter Vale, introduced to Stormwind by Muradin Bronzebeard, brings gift-giving and celebration during the coldest months. When each year ends, the kingdom offers free drinks and launches fireworks to welcome the new year. Lion's Rest, built on the site of the destroyed park, has become one of the most meaningful locations in the city. It is a peaceful place, dedicated to reflection, commemorating King Varian Rin and all those who fell in the battle for Broken Shore. A large wall bears the names of every fallen Alliance soldier from that terrible battle. King Anduin often used this place to address his people on solemn occasions, and it was here that he gave his hopeful speech after the defeat of the Legion. The people of Stormwind are described as proud and tenacious, driven by valor and optimism. They are inspired by the heroes who have come before them, seeking to rekindle humanity's former glory and forge a shining new future. Despite all the losses they have suffered, they maintain hope that better days lie ahead. As a feudal kingdom, Stormwind maintains a clear social structure. The king rules from Stormwind Keep, advised by the House of Nobles that represents the aristocratic families. Feudal lords govern the various territories of the realm: Elwyn, Westfall, Redridge, and beyond. The Church of the Holy Light provides spiritual guidance, its priests and paladins serving the people's souls as the army protects their bodies. The territories surrounding Stormwind each have their own character and challenges. Elwyn Forest, the heartland of the kingdom, provides timber and game from its ancient woodlands. Its villages are prosperous and peaceful, protected by the proximity to the capital. Goldshire serves as the main rest stop for travelers heading to or from Stormwind, its inn famous throughout the region. Westfall was once the breadbasket of the kingdom, its fertile plains producing wheat and vegetables that fed the entire realm. But years of neglect, Defias raids, and economic hardship left much of the region in decline. The farmers who remained struggled against bandits and the lack of military support. Though conditions have improved in recent years, Westfall still bears the scars of its troubled past. Redridge Mountains provides a natural defense along the kingdom's eastern border, though this has also made it a contested region. Lakeshire, the main settlement, has faced attacks from gnolls, orcs, and worse over the centuries. The people there are hardy and self-reliant, accustomed to defending themselves when help from the capital is slow to arrive. Duskwood was once called Brightwood, a beautiful forest full of life and light. But after the death of Medivh released a wave of dark energy, the region was transformed into a place of perpetual gloom. The people of Darkshire and surrounding villages live under constant threat from the undead and other horrors that infest the shadows. They are perhaps the most resilient of all Stormwind's citizens, maintaining civilization in a land that seems determined to swallow them. The burning steppes and searing gorge to the north mark the boundary between Stormwind's influence and the chaotic lands beyond. These volcanic regions were once dwarven territory, but dark iron incursions and the presence of blackrock orcs have made them dangerous borderlands. Stormwind maintains outposts to monitor these regions, but true control is difficult in such hostile terrain. The Rin Line has always allowed public access to the keep, permitting citizens to enter and petition their rulers directly. This practice concerns SI-7's Matthias Shaw from a security standpoint, but it reflects the royal family's commitment to remaining close to their people. The Golden Throne may intimidate as much as it inspires, but the door to it remains open. The city itself continues to evolve. The deep-rune tram connects Stormwind to Ironforge through tunnels that pass under mountains and beneath the sea. Stormwind Harbor links the capital to distant shores. The portals in the Mage Quarter allow instant travel to other Alliance cities. Though the world changes and new threats emerge, Stormwind adapts and endures. Since the fall of Lordaeron to the Scourge during the Third War, Stormwind has become the beacon of humanity and the most powerful nation in the Alliance. The kingdom that was once the smallest and most isolated of the Seven Kingdoms now leads the coalition that defends Azeroth against all threats. The fall of Lordaeron was a blow that shook the entire human race. The Northern Kingdom had been the largest and most powerful of the Seven Kingdoms, the political center of humanity since the days of King Tyrannus. When the Scourge swept through its cities, transforming citizens into undead monstrosities, the survivors fled south. Many of them came to Stormwind, just as the people of Stormwind had once fled north to Lordaeron after the First War. This reversal of fortunes placed a heavy responsibility on Stormwind's shoulders. The kingdom that had once been aided must now become the provider of aid. The throne that had once looked to Lordaeron for guidance must now offer guidance to others. King Varian, despite his own struggles, rose to meet this challenge. Under Stormwind's leadership, the Alliance adapted to a new reality. The Northern Kingdoms had been the traditional center of human power, but now the South took precedence. Stormwind's military became the backbone of Alliance forces. Stormwind's economy became the engine that powered Alliance operations. Stormwind's diplomacy held the coalition together when fractures threatened to tear it apart. The responsibility has not been easy to bear. Each new crisis has tested the kingdom's resources and resolve. The war against the Lich King, the Cataclysm, the campaign against Garrosh, the Legion invasion, the Fourth War, the Shadowlands crisis, each demanded sacrifices from a people who had already sacrificed so much. Yet Stormwind has never failed to answer the call. The kingdom's army is now the largest and most professional military force in the Alliance. Its navy, augmented by Kul Tiran vessels, controls the seas. Its intelligence service, SI-7, operates throughout the world, gathering information and conducting operations that keep the kingdom safe. Its mages maintain portal networks that allow rapid deployment of forces anywhere they are needed. Economically, Stormwind has become the commercial hub of the Eastern Kingdoms. Trade flows through its harbor from every corner of Azeroth. Its banking system manages the finances of the Alliance. Its guilds produce goods that are shipped to allies across the world. The gold that passes through Stormwind's markets fuels military campaigns and reconstruction efforts alike. Perhaps most importantly, Stormwind has become the spiritual center of the Alliance. The Cathedral of Light is the most important religious site in the human world, its teachings spreading to every corner of the coalition. The principles of the light, respect, tenacity, and compassion, have become the moral foundation on which the Alliance stands. This leadership role was not sought, but it was accepted. The people of Stormwind understand that their prosperity depends on the strength of the Alliance, and the strength of the Alliance depends on their willingness to lead. They have risen to the challenge, just as their ancestors rose to challenge after challenge throughout the kingdom's long history. And so we come to the present, where Stormwind stands as it has stood for over 12 centuries, though the city itself has been rebuilt more than once. The white stone walls still gleam in the sunlight. The canals still flow with clear water. The lion banners still fly proudly from every tower. The people who walk these streets are the inheritors of a legacy that stretches back to King Thoradin and the unification of humanity. They carry the blood of the Arathi in their veins, the same blood that flowed through Anduin Lothar and connects them to the dawn of human civilization. They have seen their city destroyed and rebuilt. They have suffered under the corruption of Onyxia, the tyranny of the Defias, the horror of the Scourge, the fury of Deathwing, the cruelty of the Burning Legion. They have lost kings and queens, heroes and friends. Yet still they endure, still they hope, still they believe that the light will prevail over darkness, that honor will triumph over treachery, that the bonds of fellowship will prove stronger than any enemy's hate. This is the essence of Stormwind, not its walls, or its keep, or its districts, but the spirit of its people. From the guards who patrol the streets, to the merchants who trade in the markets, from the priests who heal in the cathedral, to the soldiers who fight on distant battlefields, they share a common identity as Stormwindians, heirs to a tradition of resilience that has been tested again and again. The throne currently sits empty, awaiting the return of King Anduin Rin. The regent Turalian governs capably in his absence, but all know that the true king will someday come home. Anduin's journey of healing continues, his faith slowly rebuilding, his connection to the light gradually returning. When he does return, he will find a city that has kept faith with him. The streets will be swept clean, the guards will stand at attention, and the people will welcome their king with joy. For Stormwind has learned that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes eventually. Let that thought carry you now into peaceful rest. Imagine the sun setting over Stormwind, painting the white stone towers in shades of gold and orange. The canals reflect the dying light like ribbons of fire. The sounds of the day fade into evening quiet. In the Cathedral of Light, evening prayers begin, their gentle harmonies drifting across the district. In the trade district, merchants close their stalls and head home to their families. In Old Town, taverns fill with off-duty soldiers sharing stories and ale. In the Dwarven district, the forges bank their fires for the night. High in Stormwind Keep, the empty throne awaits its king, but it is not lonely. The spirit of every Wren who ever sat upon it lingers in the stones, watching over the kingdom they built and loved. London, Barathen the Adamant, Llane, Varian the Wolf King, they are all there in some sense, their legacy continuing through the city that bears their family's name. And tomorrow, Stormwind will rise again to face whatever challenges come. Its people will go about their lives, working and laughing and loving, secure in the knowledge that they are part of something larger than themselves. They are the Alliance. They are humanity's hope. They are the children of Stormwind. The lights dim across the city as night deepens. Stars appear overhead, the same stars that shone when Thoradin first united humanity, the same stars that guided the Arathi south to found this kingdom. Somewhere, a child is being told the story of Anduin Lothar, or Varian's sacrifice, or the rebuilding after the First War. The stories continue, the legacy endures, and Stormwind sleeps peacefully, dreaming of the dawn to come. Thank you for joining us for this journey through the complete history of Stormwind. If you enjoyed this peaceful exploration of Warcraft lore, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. Your support helps us create more content like this. Until next time, sleep well, champion, for the Alliance.